Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thorough Newspaper Analysis, which is brought to you by LawSikho. So, today we will be discussing two articles. One is from The Hindu, titled as At 75, the UN Needs a Rebirth. Now, as we know, that 24th of this October will mark 75 years, that is the Diamond Jubilee of the United Nations. So, what are the new prospects for the United Nations and in which areas does it need to bring in changes have been discussed in this article. And the second one from the Indian Express, it is a very nice read and it is titled as Healthy and Wise, wherein a greater focus on the Nutri cereals and that we actually know as the millets has been laid down, and what steps have been taken by the government of India to inculcate this practice of nutritional eating has been discussed in this article. And thirdly, we have the News and Flash column in which we'll be discussing the crisp and small news points more important for a prelims exam. So if you're also preparing for judicial services exam, you can definitely have a look at the LawSikho course that we have as the judiciary test prep course. The link is there in the description box, and from its landing page, you can definitely download free study material for yourself as well. With this, let's see that what is the multiple choice question for the day. Which of the following is known as Nutri cereal? First, jowar. Second, bajra. Third, ragi. Or fourth, all of the above. So you can jot down the answer in the comment section below. Descriptive question for the day is, multilateralism is what is required in the world order today, as all the member nations of the United Nations deserve equal say in the global decisions. Discuss the role India can play in this regard. And by multilateralism, we simply mean wherein there is no one supreme power, rather there are different directions to which power is directed, and mostly all the powers have equal say instead of one becoming the superpower. So the answer must be written within a word limit of 250 to maximum 300 words. With this, let's start with the first article for the day, which talks about the UN tussle between principle and power. Basically, here, principle means the very ideals or the very goals that were laid down in the United Nations Charter and the very purpose for which the United Nations was brought into being. And the power actually refers to who has or which member nation has the real power to decide upon such principles, or which nation actually exercises the bargaining power in order to make the decisions in its own favor. So as we know, as we already said, the 24th of this October will mark the Diamond Jubilee, that is 75 years of the United Nations, and that is why it becomes very pivotal to discuss the the achievements of United Nations, and even more of that, we need to understand as to what is the real tussle or what is the real friction that exists between principle and power. Now let's understand it into detail. So by principle, we mean it represents the hopes of a peaceful and just world order, and multilateral cooperation, abidance by international law, and uplift of the downtrodden. So basically, as we know, that even in the United Nations Charter, these are the wholesome principles are these as well, only that we should have a multilateral cooperative approach, we should abide by the international laws, and we should try to uplift the downtrodden. And with this, let's understand that what has been the play of power in the United Nations. So the power has been it was designed to privilege the most powerful states in the post-World War II. Now, as we know that before the United Nations, we had the League of Nations, which actually had collapsed very badly after the Second World War ended in 1945. And so in 1945 itself, we came up as a next level of the League of Nations called as the United Nations, which we have till date. And it has been the truth that the world powers of the then existing world after the World War II actually became the most powerful states in the United Nations as well. Now you can consider it to be basically these are the 5 permanent members of the Security Council as well, be it the US, UK, Russia, France, or even the other 5th one that we know as China. So these are the P5 members, and they were the most dominant countries at the time of World War II as well, like after it got concluded. And even till date, we see that they enjoy this privilege of being the permanent 5 members of the United Nations Security Council, and also they have the veto power as well. Then grants the powerful commanding heights over international politics, like as we just discussed, the veto power and permanent seats in the United Nations Security Council. And it is well debated in today's time that if we really want to approach towards a multilateral world where we do not want any particular countries to be the superpowers of the world, and rather we aspire to give equal say and equal opportunity to all the nations, then it is really important that we shun down this idea of now, at least now, having the P5 members and giving them the veto. And this is really an idea which gives them superseding powers for any kinds of principles that were actually brought in by the United Nations. Now, the justification that has been given through this side is that we keep all the major powers inside the United Nations and reasonably happy through joint control over the United Nations Security Council, which we know as the collective command model. This is a very crucial point that we need to understand, as the very reason why the World War actually could happen was that there were some superpowers of the world that had the potential of really fighting with each other. But now, after the United Nations got incepted and the P5 members of the United Nations Security Council came into being, the very purpose of bringing these five superpowers all together in one cabinet was that all these powers have been brought together, and thus, instead of working against each other, bringing another situation of World War that might have been a World War III, instead of that, now they will work in maybe consonance with each other, being part of the similar body or the inner circle of the similar body. So earlier, this was a very valid justification in a way, because if at all it happened that maybe anyone would have been given the status of the permanent member of Security Council, and for example, US might have been given the status of permanent member of Security Council, and Russia wouldn't have been given the same status. There was a very, very possible chance that would have been a tussle. There could have been a tussle between these two countries again, giving rise to another world war, which actually they say did not happen just because of this very idea of having a collective command model wherein all the superpowers were brought together and made part of the same body to be collectively responsible for the whole world. But now it's been 75 years to that. And do you not think that it is really necessary that we rekindle the entire idea of having the collective command model? So that is the very point that has been discussed in this article, that now the world order, the situations in the world are totally different. Everybody, like most of the nations, actually are demanding a multilateral approach. And in that scenario, giving such sweeping powers to just five countries of this whole world is not really very egalitarian or on an equilibrium status. Now let's understand that why did actually the collective command model did not work, and it actually could not suffice with the real intention that it was actually made for. So, like as we know that even just after the World War II, we had the Cold War, which pushed to the verge of irrelevance by the Cold War. So, this collective command model was actually brought down by the it was the very purpose of this collective command model did not was not really achieved due to the prevalence of the Cold War, and there were obstacles to implementation of the noble visions of the peace, development, and human rights just because of the Cold War, which had a long-term impact on the countries, and thus the very purpose. Though we can say that yes, a huge world war was maybe it was mitigated just because of the P5 idea or the collective command model, but it still did not reap the envisioned benefits because we still had a very prolonged Cold War that went for years in the world order. And then even after the Cold War, the new world order was led by US. So again, there was no system that we had talked about multilateralism. So there was still the new world order was still led by the United States, and the problem of power seemed to have been solved. So the problem of power actually, it was like a unilateral control came over with US, and it is now when various countries, even India, moves very proficiently for having a multilateral world order. So that should be that is something that is the need of the hour. And if we talk about the new Cold War, so there, as we know, there is clash between China and the US involving Russia, Turkey, Iran, and Israel. Then we have the competitive vetoing by P5, like for various reforms are also blocked by these countries. And the only solution to this that can be seen for the time being is replacing the P5 consensus method by simple majority. And that the decisions in the United Nations Security Council be taken by simple majority, wherein the permanent as well as the non-permanent members Like, as we know that India has also been recently voted as a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. So all of these should be given an equal value of vote, and the very system of veto should be taken away, and the decisions or the reforms should be brought simply by the method of simple majority, rather than by giving such sweeping powers to just 5 countries of this whole world. So this was all for this article. Let's discuss the second article, which also is a very interesting one, which discusses about the Nutri cereals. Now, as the name itself is suggesting, we can conclude by our basic common understanding that Nutri cereals are those specific cereals that have a greater tendency of providing nutrients. And as we know that India, even in the global hunger index as well, we have not really fared very well. We have really performed very poor, and in fact, we have performed poorer than our neighboring countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, and even Sri Lanka. So in that scenario, it has also been brought out that the level of nutrition also in our country has not been really good, and the levels of wasting and stunting, specifically in the children below the age of 5 years, has been significant. Now, in this regard, it is the Nutri cereal, or these are the Nutri cereals that can actually rescue us from this entire situation. And Nutri cereals are those cereals which are rich in the nutrients. And if in this article, if we talk about that, which Nutri cereals are we referring to, these are the millets. Now, as we know, that World Food Day, which was it was celebrated and it was observed on 16th of October, Prime Minister Modi shared insights on the interplay as in the interrelationship that exists between among nutrition, food systems, and farmers' welfare. So, in a way, a very nice consensus has been brought that if not, it is not something that would benefit only one side of our country, but also it would benefit the nutritional demands. Secondly, for the food security as well, for adding value to the food system, and as well as for the farmers' welfare as well. Now, let's understand how will it happen. So basically, in this idea, there has been a huge focus that has been laid down on the production of millets. And millets are actually the Nutri cereals. So millets are also known as Nutri cereals because they're highly rich in various micronutrients. We'll see that in a while. And the Food and Agriculture Organization endorsed India's declaration of 2023 as the International Year of Millets. So even as we know that we have also made a proposal to the United Nations that the year 2019 be declared as the International Year of Millets. As we know that by pronouncing any particular year, any particular day as the International Day of something, like we have the World Food Day and International Year of Millets, we actually try to lay emphasis on the very importance of that particular subject. And that is the very idea of having declared International Year of Millets as 2023, like we are planning to do so, to emphasize enough on the very importance that these nutricereals play in our entire agricultural cycle, as well as nutrition and farmers' welfare. Now, as we know that these millets, like if there are various kinds of millets and the major millets, like if we will study it into a greater depth as well, that the major millets that are grown in India are basically three types. So they are jowar, bajra, and ragi. So jowar, as we know, is known as sorghum, bajra is known as the pearl millet, and ragi is known as the finger millet. So these are the most prominent kinds of millets that are grown in India. And there are a lot of states in India that actually have excelled, or they're doing very well in the production of millets. Like we have Rajasthan, Haryana, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and Telangana. So all of these states are faring really well in the production of millets, and it has to be further encouraged, and it is the government also taking steps in this regard. Now, the government is planning to incentivize production of Nutri-cereals to increase the intake of diverse and nutritious diets. And as I just discussed, that the millets, they are like very nutritious in providing the micronutrients, like we have the copper, zinc, magnesium, phosphorus, folate, and even in various kinds of antioxidants, etc. So millets are something that can cater to the needs of the human body to serve the very micronutrients that are very crucial in the overall growth of the human body, and also to improve availability in the markets and bring benefits to the small and medium farmers. Now let's understand that what are the various strategies or various steps that the government is planning, and also it has been doing since a while now, to enhance and promote the growth and production of the Nutri cereals. Now, here one thing before this we need to understand is that India, this is not something like which has been brought very recently to India. So, growing millets is not a novel idea in India. Even after the independence, like after 1947, India was very rich in growing the millets. But as we know that due to the various land reforms and also the various land arbitrary land laws that existed in the British era, India was not very secure in terms of food. So we were actually struggling a lot to bring ourselves food security, and that is why a lot of emphasis was laid on the agriculture as well. And after the 1960s, when we had the time of Green Revolution, so a greater emphasis through high yielding varieties was made on wheat and rice alone, and that is why millets were considered to be less yielding, and that is why the farmers were not very incentivized to produce a lot of nutri cereals. But now, since we have successfully achieved the status of being very secure in the terms of food and our own needs for the agricultural products, so it is the time that we now gain back to our capacity of growing the millets. Now, for that purpose, let's understand that what can be the various steps and what have been the various steps that have been taken in this regard. First one, rebrand coarse cereals or millets as nutri cereals. Now, it is very important for us to understand in the very first place that these things, which we might not really understand to be so essential for the human growth and nutritional enhancement, are actually very important. Like you must have seen in the advertisements of oats and some Nutri-Choice biscuits and stuff like that, wherein they very enthusiastically promote that this contains ragi, jowar, bajra, and various other kinds of nutri cereals. This is how they try to encash the value of their products that they are actually putting up in their edible or food products. And that is why it is how that branding of millets as nutri cereals would put up into the mind of the people that this is something that is very nutritious in its value, and thus we should invest more not only into growing it but also into consuming it more. So thus, in 2018 and 19, the production of the millets was extended to over 112 districts and 14 states approximately. Then, second strategy, it ensure that at least 50% return to the farmers. So this has been done through the MSP, like increasing the value of the minimum support price or the share of the percentage of the MSP that is provided on the nutri cereals. Now, as we know that in India, the major MSP is provided in the field of or in the crops called of rice and wheat alone. Like there are other crops as well, but the largest share of the MSP is provided in wheat and rice. But now this MSP share has been increased for these nutri cereals as well, so that the farmers are also incentivized to grow more of these nutri cereals. Next, provide steady market for the produce, and to government included millets in the PDS as well. So now, once we are enhancing and we are incentivizing the farmers to grow the millets, it is also important that we make the consumers of these millets also aware that how nutritious and important these nutri cereals are. And that is why we need to prepare a market that can actually consume this entire production of nutri cereals in the country. For that, the government has included the millets in the public distribution system, and along with the rice, wheat, and other staple diet cereals, millets are also now provided by the government to make the people aware of the very value of these nutri cereals. And fourthly, increase the area, production, and yield of the millets. Just like it will be something like bringing another green revolution specifically for the nutri cereals in the country. And to match the cultivation of nutri cereals with local topography and natural resources and as well, and build the value chains and support marketability by the farmer produce organizations. So these will actually take a lot of interest in providing a better atmosphere for the growth of these millets or the nutri cereals, and also for a valuable consumption of the same. And to final strategy, we have promote research or interlinkages between crop diversity and dietary diversity. Now, as we know, when we were very young, we used to study in our very class 5th and 6th science books that what do we actually mean by a balanced diet. So very accurately, a balanced diet means a diet which has the accurate proportion of all the important nutrients and micronutrients that a human body normally needs for a good and healthy growth. And that is why it is very important to have dietary diversity, as in we should not always keep on intaking the same kinds of nutrients every day and every now and then. Rather, it is very important that we change our eating patterns or the food patterns, and also do a mix and match of the various nutrients. And that is why Crop diversity is also important, wherein different kinds of crops are grown. So this will not only enhance the dietary or nutrition levels in the humans, but also in the crop diversity in the agriculture sector as well. And finally, behavioral change campaign to generate consumer demand. And similarly, just like awareness will actually make us more aware. Now, very recently, you must have seen that the consumption of oats has also increased foldsome in the country, to many fold like in the country. Now people are actually realizing that how nutritious the oats are, and in a similar way this behavioral change campaign can lead to a greater and more positive consumption of nutraceuticals as well. With this, we are done with our major articles for the day. Let's see that what do we have for news in flash. First, like the only one we have for the day, Sri Lankan Parliament passes 20th Amendment. So it has been passed with two-third majority, and it envisages the expansive powers and greater immunity for the executive president. It rolls back the 19th Amendment, which was brought in 2015, that sought to clip or bring down or curb some presidential powers while strengthening the parliament. This new legislation in turn reduced the PM's role to a ceremonial one, and the president has been given huge and expensive powers through this. So finally, it has been passed. So that was the latest update on this. With this, we are done for the day. We hope it was a good and informative session for you all. Thank you so much.